The Tories are always telling us that asylum seekers should be entering the UK through, quote, safe and legal routes. And no one says this more so than Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who likes to call anyone who comes through any other means illegal.
We have already several safe and legal routes through which people who are genuine asylum seekers can make their application. And I'm very proud, as I've set out already, of our record of welcoming people who are genuinely fleeing persecution and war and conflict and human rights violations. However, we cannot accept the situation where people are bypassing those routes, jumping the queue effectively on illegitimate bases and making fabricated claims of being victims.
So, there are abundant, safe and legal routes, and anyone who doesn't take them is an economic migrant lying to us about needing asylum. Now, plenty of MPs have tried to pin down Braverman over what exactly those routes are, but she's been pretty good at evading those questions. Until now, that is. Braverman has appeared before the Home Affairs Select Committee, where Tory MP Tim Loughton set her this challenge.
Just a bit of role play. I'm a 16-year-old orphan from an East African country escaping a war zone and religious persecution. And I have a sibling legally in the United Kingdom at the moment. What is a safe and legal route for me to come to the United Kingdom?
Well, we have... you're fleeing which country, sorry?
Any African country.
Any African country. Well,
could be any continent, but let's say any African country. I don't want to name one because then their Prime Minister might have a go at me for demonising their population. So let's just theoretically talk about an African country which is going through a period of turbulence and which is persecuting its citizens, including an innocent 16-year-old like me.
Well, we have an asylum system and people can put in applications for asylum.
How would I do that?
Well, you can do it through the safe and legal routes that we have. We have offered 390,000 places to people seeking safety from various countries around the world.
I'm not Syrian, I'm not Afghan, I'm not Ukrainian, not any of those specific schemes. The Dub scheme is historic. What scheme's open to me?
Well, if you are able to get to the UK, you are able to put in an application for asylum.
But I would only enter the UK illegally then, wouldn't I?
Well, that would, if you put in your application for asylum upon arrival, that would be the process that you enter.
How could I arrive in the UK if I didn't have permission to get onto an aircraft legally to arrive in the UK?
Let me just invite other colleagues if there's anything they want to add.
I mean, you could engage with UNHCR. I mean, depending which country you're from, you could engage with UNHCR, and that would be a way of getting leave to enter the UK in order to put in an asylum claim. But I accept that there are some countries where that would not be possible.
I think the point is that there's a shortage of safe and legal routes, other than for specific groups of people that we have generously offered safe haven to.
It's such an effective line of questioning. And I mean, we've been saying this for months on this show. I mean, she says this moral, people are jumping the queue if they don't take the proper routes. The proper routes don't exist. And I think that was really, really clear when the moment where sort of, you could see in Suella Braverman's head, she was sort of saying, do I really have to say this? He's like, how would they apply? She says, well, if you were able to get to the UK, you can apply if you come to the UK, if you're an asylum seeker. Well, all the people trying to come to the UK right now who don't already have a right to be here, so most asylum seekers can't just get on a plane and come here because they don't have a visa, right? The only way to get to the UK is to cross the channel. For billions of people around the world, if they want to come to the UK to claim asylum, the only way they can come here is to cross the channel. And then not only will they get, it will take months and years to process their claim and they risk being sent to Rwanda, but what they'll have is Suella Braverman standing up on national television and constantly moralizing and saying, these people should have applied for asylum the proper way. There is literally no other way to apply for asylum than cross the channel and do it in the UK, as she said in that answer.
Surely this should have been a line of questioning that the press made at the beginning of this Conservative government, in particular in the beginning of, as far back as Priti Patel. My jaw honestly hit the floor when she said, once you arrive in the UK, you can make an application for asylum. It was like a real, it was a real jaw-dropping moment, because it was like, is this the same woman who has been demonizing people for actually making it to UK shores, for taking, as you said, the only available route and accessible route to UK shores as a refugee. You look at her predecessor, Priti Patel, who she is very much in line with politically on this issue. That's someone who spoke about using wave machines in the Channel in order to push small boats back. So if you understand that those boats that you are trying to push back into the Channel are carrying refugees and not people who are hauling their entire family into, what is often almost a death trap, in order to try and seek refuge in a country where they might speak the language or they might have some kind of local community or whatever, then you have to accept that it is the position of the UK government, essentially, that unless you come from a specific set of countries, you cannot access refuge in this country, that we do not accept refugees in this country, with the exception of a specific limited number of countries for which there is a specific program. So given that it is now clear that the current Home Secretary and the previous Home Secretary are aware of that, we can now essentially count out the idea that Britain has this proud history of welcoming and accepting refugees. That is obviously ridiculous, and there is no attempt to uphold that alleged history. Secondly, we can understand that the deaths in the Mediterranean aren't the result of this kind of decontextualized intervention from a few savvy people traffickers, that actually this is a systemically created phenomenon by the deliberate and willful negligence and neglect of our government. And finally, we can see that the point of this government, and the point of previous iterations of this government in particular, has not been to create a cohesive immigration system. It's not been to create a process, but rather it's been to create chaos and this ongoing spectacle of violence. We saw this with Braverman refusing to transfer people to available accommodation and instead keeping them in Manston, a detention centre that had, public health outbreaks, that had outbreaks of MRSA and was overcrowded and was clearly unfit for human habitation. Her explicitly refusing to offer alternative accommodation, even though that alternative accommodation was available, is clear that the strategy of this government is to feed and cultivate a sense of chaos at the border, in order to then further justify its heavy-handedness and its ability to project a tough on immigration stance, which then strengthens their grip on Britain's public consciousness, which it has whipped into this state of frenzy and fear. And so we know, and that has just been completely reinforced by that clip, that is the function of anti-migrant rhetoric by this government. But for me, as I said at the beginning, I don't understand why it's taken this long, given that this has been the policy of the government for a very long time, to essentially deliberately cultivate a context in which people are having to cross the Channel in these dangerous and distressing ways, and to cultivate this sense of chaos. Given that has actually been the strategy of the government for so long, where has our press been on actually asking that simple question of, hey, could you just outline to me what the safe and legal route actually looks like in a tangible way? Is it practicable? Is it actionable for someone who is fleeing violence or fleeing conflict? Clearly not. And I think that to me is the real failure here, that these questions have not been asked by our press, and instead our press has been encouraging and pushing the government to be even more hardline and to be even more deceptive on these questions, rather than asking the kind of critically interrogating these policies, which fall apart under the slightest bit of pressure, as we could see in that clip.